make a future leader, how to prepare, or how to train the future leaders, how to make leaders out of the youngsters. That is a topic which is which is presented by Leila Passah. She is a woman activist. I welcome her on behalf of Friday Forum and all other members. I request Rati Rao to kindly introduce her for a few minutes and then she can start her presentation. Okay, Rati Rao, hand over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Divakar. And Leila Passah is very active in today. The activity is our women's bill, that is the women's reservation, and we have a coalition of all the women's movement people, and it's a national level coalition, and in that Laila is very active. If you ask me what is her qualifications, she is an international level, senior international level advisor. Her basic is she is an economics major, then she has PG diploma in communication and public relations, and expertise in leadership and gender training and advocacy. That is a real advocacy thing. And she has given a lot of work on mission-driven business development programs. And she is with the youth and social justice. She is a consultant for them. She is a National General Secretary of YWCA. And as I said, she is a senior international advisor. So we have very learned Leila Passah with us. I am requesting Leila to present your presentation. Over to Leila.
Thank you so much, Rati. That introduction is making me even more nervous now. But thank you so much for the invitation, and to all the organizers of Friday Forum. I think it is such a wonderful concept that has been initiated. I've just been hearing from your members, and I'm really inspired by that. And I think we need more and more such platforms where the civil society organizations, citizens across the country need to come together and continuously be advocates of change and social transformation. So, ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ. ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ನನ್ನ ಮನೆ, ಆದರೆ ನನ್ನ ಕನ್ನಡ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ತಪ್ಪಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ದಯವಿಟ್ಟು ಕ್ಷಮಿಸಿ. ನಿಮ್ಮ ಜೊತೆ ಇರುವುದು ನನಗೆ ತುಂಬ ಸಂತೋಷ. ನಾ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗೈತಿ ಕನ್ನಡ, ನಾ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಿಕ್ಕೆ ತುಂಬ ಕಷ್ಟ, ಅದನ್ನಾல ಪ್ಲೀಸ್ ಫರ್ಗಿವ್ ಮೀ. Although my Kannada is very, very limited, but I hope today to speak in a language that we all understand. And it is for me the language of justice, a language of equality, and language of hope. And I've just prepared a few slides so that we can all, I hope my technology is okay. Otherwise, I'm going to ask Mr. Mani to please help me. I don't know if you can all see that.
Yeah, we can see this. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I was invited to speak on, when Rati invited me, on women's movement shaping young women leaders. And my mind actually traveled back to more than 4 decades. I was young once, and I'm sure we can all say that around this table. At 22, I walked into a building looking for Razia Ismail. At that time, hoping to invite her as a resource person for one of my college workshops on social issues. And that year, it was the year of the child shelter for children, and the UN had declared it UN Convention on the Rights of the Child was also happening at that time. But when I walked in, one of my senior colleagues at that time led me into a board meeting, and she literally, it was an unexpected invitation that completely changed the course of my life, I can say. Around the table sat such formidable women. I was very intimidated, of course, but they debated so passionately about politics. They analyzed politics. They disagreed very openly, but they spoke with such courage and conviction. And among them was Miss Ivy Khan. Some of you may know her or remember her. I had no idea that she, at that time in that room, would shape my understanding of leadership, justice, as well as the power of collective action. Looking back, I realized I wasn't simply entering a boardroom. I was inheriting a movement with a rich legacy that shaped generations of women leaders by trusting young women, challenging them to critically and giving them the courage to act. Today, that legacy, I feel that's not just simply to remember it, but we need to reawaken, to reimagine it, and also recreate it so that it remains relevant as well as responsive. Because some of our movements that have had a long history of even over 100 years, the movement that I come from, it's losing its relevance. And also, how do we engage with the younger women, the younger leadership, is to stay relevant and also to make sure that we make the vision so real and dynamic in responding to the current issues in our country. And as we all know, we are living through some very difficult times right now. So I'd like to quickly take you back through the historical evolvement of the women's movement. The very first one was calling of the All India Women's Conference that happened in Pune in 1927 in early January. There, it was held in a college called the Ferguson College. And they had 2,000 women. Imagine at that time, 1927, 2,000 women from across the country attending the conference. And they came from across India by train, by boat, by bullock carts even. There's a mention of that. Why? To discuss educational reform. At that time, to discuss girls' education. But they quickly realized that education could not be separated from child marriage or legal rights or a political participation and equality of women. So that marked actually the beginning of India's most influential women's movement, which we call today the All India Women's Conference. Then we have the 1930s to the 40s, where we had women as part of the struggle to fight for freedom of the country. So they were at the forefront with other martyrs and with other leaders fighting for our freedom. And that's something which is very, very important to note, that women were very much there at that time too. Then, of course, we have the 1947 to 50. Again, a very significant time where we've started to talk about the Constitution of India itself and the basic fundamental rights of equality that were impacting on women. So when the Constitution promised us justice, equality, and dignity for all, yet women also recognized that constitutional guarantee alone would not change the deep-rooted social realities and the patriarchy. So the struggle therefore continued. In 1975 was the the declaration of the International Women's Year, which also gave a kind of a renewed momentum to women's organizing in India because new voices emerged. A lot of movements were mobilized around the whole question of violence against women, livelihoods, health, labor rights, land rights, and political participation, of course, and many other issues affecting women, their status, and their lives. So that particular year was very significant because we had the support of the solidarity networks around the world also of what we in India as women were also working on. Then it celebrated 10 years later. It was a kind of a place where women's organizations at the national as well as at the global level came together to look at some forward-looking strategy. With the meeting actually happened in Nairobi, but it was a very significant meeting for the women's movement because it was the third World Conference on Women. So, and then and it was also the end of the UN decade for women from 1976 to 1985. So I think all these milestones I'm only mentioning because these helped us to realize that when women come together, especially networks, women's organizations, they have a huge history. Like I said, they go way back to, in India itself, it goes back to 1875. And while it started with vocational training for women, but it quickly built up into issues of justice for women. So as we all know, also when we come into the early 90s, 1992, to 1993, we, had this major 73rd and 74th constitutional amendment that allowed for women in governance at the panchayati level and also at the urban local bodies. This was very, very significant because we're not just talking of women in cities or women of a privileged community or class, but we're talking about local governance, where it really also hugely matters. And so that was something, and that since then, a lot of the states have, at least, even though it was a 33% requirement, at least have 50% now in the Panchayati Raj. So again, all these were built around the work of the women's movements, which for me, we can have a whole day's workshop just around how each movement in India also came together. Regardless, there were some left-wing organizations with an association with the left parties. There were some organizations who were non-partisan, but were very, very clear on having the political will to fight for the basic rights that have been entitled or constitutionally provided for women. So there were movements across, but we came together. And to quickly mention here, one of the first 3 national women's movements that came together and formed a kind of an alliance, then grew to some other national women's organizations, of about 7 of them. So we called ourselves the 7 Sisters. And this was really a force for the government of India to reckon with. They could not ignore us. In fact, they used to consult with us. Nothing will get passed, whether it's dowry or sati or PCPD Act or Uniform Civil Code or the gender budgeting also, would always come through the process of the Women's Movements Collective coming together, studying the implications of what changes are happening, brought forth by different governments, and they will study it very, very carefully and provide their demands. Just like even when the Nirbhaya case happened, the Justice Verma Commission was formed. One of the first things they did was, why weren't the women's organizations? They were the ones first on the street the very next day in the morning. That is a quick response with a lot of the women's networks, and we join in together. And there also, the committee took very, very serious note of what the women's organizations are doing and what they are working on in the communities, in the field, on different issues. So that's how the movement has been building up, both nationally and our presence in the global platform. Why it is important is because it is going through our government also. Because the government, on one hand, is ratifying certain international laws, but if they're not able to implement it when they come back to their home countries, we as women's movements, we lobby with all these parliamentarians, with these government representatives, leaders who come back from these big conferences and have ratified over there. They've signed on a document, but often it doesn't get followed up here. So they do know there's a pressure group back home. So that was the strength of the women's movement. So in 1995, later, what came together as a Beijing platform for action was once again a huge platform where women's organizations, government representatives, NGOs, all of them came together on this issue to say that how do we carry forward the work advancing women's advocacy work, development work, and making sure that women's demands are always at the forefront. Then, of course, now, as you all know, I think you already had in the last two Friday forums where leading women activists have been engaging with you in conversation on the Women's Reservation Act that needs to be passed now. We are asking for a very simple, single demand for the last 30 years. We asked after 25 years, that is 5 years ago, again, the women's movements came together and said that we are recalling this time that for 25 years since we've asked for the passage of this bill. It was passed in the Rajya Sabha in 2010, but now again, due to the conditionalities that they have proposed, it has delayed it and derailed it. And they're riding on the Women's Reservation Bill. Even as recent as the April special session in Parliament, they went ahead to do this at the cost of Women's Reservation Bill and trying to push for the delimitation. They did not consult. Neither was it even publicly informed. I think it came into the public domain much later. But we immediately called for a press conference to say that this cannot happen. We refuse to be accepted as women who have fought so hard for political representation, for women in political decision-making for the last 30 years, for 33% reservation. Again, we are being used. We are used as a smokescreen, somebody said in the press conference today. Today, there was a press conference that brought together women's organizations because the monsoon session is going to start on the 20th and 21st of July. So we are asking for this single demand to be implemented now, removing the two conditionalities, that is the census and delimitation clause. So for me, today, the next generation needs to write the next chapter. Because what we are saying is the issues that we have addressed all these decades, all these years, whether it's violence against women or adolescent health or sexual reproductive health rights of women, especially young women, legal literacy, again, this whole question of women's political participation, which is again gaining strength and momentum with the coming together of the women's movement. And also, communal harmony was something that we used to work on years ago, even as students. I remember being in college and how to, there was that constant theme, unity in diversity and all. But what do we see today? Reality is homophobia. We see xenophobia. We see all kinds of phobias. We see, violence against the minority groups, whether we talk about, it's horrendous. We can go into details of the kind of violence and atrocities that go on today against Dalits, against Muslims, against Christians, all over. And how are we going to get everybody on board to say that this is a human rights violation. We cannot accept violence. And we cannot have peace unless we have justice either. So we've been addressing these issues, even the whole issue of environment. Today, people talk about climate change, the effects of, but the wars that are going on around, what have we leaving this planet with? What are we leaving our younger generation with? A destroyed planet, a polluted planet, an exploited planet. There are political wars going around because of the corporatization and the investments in literally destroying our natural reserves, natural forests. Today, political deals are made around, natural minerals, the wealth of minerals, wealth of resources. Nobody's talking about displacement of local indigenous communities. They will not even bother about the local indigenous tribes who are going to be displaced at the cost. And they talk about global. It's become so, that also has become a political issue. I think we should really work on that. And this is where young people also come in, because that is what they will be inheriting. How do they come out of a planet that is being destroyed? So I think we're also, as a women's movement, responsible for addressing the issues of the environment, the ecology, and how it's also affecting women who are actually dependent on environmental resources and sources that support, that actually they live off these resources. And women's movements have always been up in the front when there's an immediate cost of living issue, livelihood issue, even as recent as the gas prices going up. There's a war we know is going on in the Middle East, but the immediate effect is in the household, effect on women who are actually operating those gas stoves. So I think while women's movements today are seen as a old kind of legacy, it's not. It has to be constantly generated, and the only way it can happen is, like I said, our time is the next generation, is their chapter. So in terms of for me personally, I thought entering into a board meeting was something which was only the beginning. But very soon for me, it became a much larger world, a world of activism. And I was very happy in my own journey to see so many young activists who are coming forward in big numbers, for rallies, for protests, for signature campaigns, because those issues immediately affect them, whether it's the Nirbhaya, whether it's constitutional values that we're talking about today, whether it's secularism, it directly impacts on young people, young women, students in particular. So I think our work, that these were never isolated issues for me, they were deeply interconnected. And it cannot be separated from her economic insecurity when we talk about women and violence against women. So we're trying to see how much of our advocacy efforts around these issues of justice, equality, democracy, secularism, constitutional values is so important, is so important. And we're also talking about representation. For me is very important, diversity, the new voices that are coming up now. And unless we're able to share this leadership, I don't think we are going to be passing on. Today, I was very happy, even at the press conference, that there was like an intergenerational representation of younger women leaders representing their organization to talk about the importance of women's reservation. It has to happen. It had to happen a long time ago. Today they talk about intergeneration, but I lived it. My immediate colleague was about 20, 30 years ago. My boss was 60 at that time. But I think if we are really serious about passing on the legacy, women leaders, young women leaders, it has to happen today. Not say that they are young leaders of tomorrow. They are so committed, they are so passionate, and they're determined to fight their cause if we only provide that kind of space for those new voices. And we have especially seen that in terms of diversity, especially violence against Dalits, Adivasis, tribals, the Northeast, and Manipur, how the government had kept silent. And I must tell you that one of the first women's movements, Annie Raja from NFIW, I remember going, she went as part of the task force to go to Manipur. It was in the middle of that intense violence. And immediately, of course, an FIR was filed against her and the legal activist who went with her. But I'm just saying women's movements need to come back with a different approach, with working with young women together, making sure that there's that shared space and leadership where we'll build each other. I have so much to learn from young women today. I continue to learn. We just have to trust and say that we had our time. This is their time. They know we are there strongly backing their supporting them and their leadership, but it really is their time to find new creative ways of resistance. This creative resistance comes from younger people. I've noticed it in the social media of how they work on creative resistance through very creative means. And so for me, knowing our history is very, very important. I think a lot of us, we dismiss history. We sort of, but it's very important, I tell everybody, not just the younger people, but even us who belong or are associated with movements of social justice. Let's study our history, let's hold on to those values that they had, and we can build on it because we are building on the shoulders of giants today. Some of these women's photographs I've put here, there have really been giants on seeing policies. They're working on policies that have changed, have impacted on women. And we are here because of those women who led these movements so bravely. So, for me, the first person who opened the door, like I said, while entering the board meeting, it was my senior colleague. This is almost, like I said, I was 22. I was young once, and she opened the door for me, Sadhana. And maybe I can only say in the end, may we have the courage to keep opening doors for others, especially for young women who I think are just waiting for that space to be created. It has to be a space that is also gives them that confidence, that is safe for them. Our kind of work that we do is also risky, but we are a much larger group. I think if we remember that our movements are a collective, it's a women's collective, it's a collective of so many organizations. And so it's not just one individual. So if I am going out into the street, we know that we have the backing of institutions and movements that have such a strong presence in our country. And we need to reclaim that presence. We need to also show our governments that this movement of collectives, what started with 3, then 7 sisters, then 9 sisters, is now all over the country with a lot of autonomous groups, a lot of women's groups, a lot of interest groups, where we all come together, we converge around social justice and human rights. So I don't think the government can really ignore us. Only thing is we need to stand united. We need to walk together. We need to do our advocacy work together. We need to strategically plan so that we don't get pushed away, or we don't get, we need to, that's where we need the experiences and presence and vision of different organizations who have a very specific experience that they bring in. And so our greatest legacy for me is not simply the work we have done, but the doors that we open for those who come after us. And I now leave you with the voice of the next generation. I have asked Pearl to identify a young woman, Sumita, whom you'll be happy to know, will share a poem in Kannada for all of us. So I will now invite Sumita to close this presentation with the poem that she will share with us in Kannada. Sumita, please. Pearl, is Sumita there? I'm sorry.
Hello, yes, ma'am.
Please, Sumita, go ahead.
Hello. Yes,
Ah,
ma'am.
really?
Sumita, yeah, please read the poem.
Yes, ma'am. ಹೆಣ್ಣಿನ ಹೆಜ್ಜೆ ನಿಂತರೆ ಇತಿಹಾಸ ಮೂಡುತ್ತದೆ. ಹೆಣ್ಣಿನ ಧ್ವನಿ ಕೇಳಿದರೆ ಸಮಾಜವೇ ಎಚ್ಚರಗೊಳ್ಳುತ್ತದೆ. ಒಬ್ಬಳ ಕನಸು ಅನೇಕರ ದಾರಿಯಾಗುತ್ತದೆ. ಒಟ್ಟಾಗಿ ನಡೆದಾಗ ಬದಲಾವಣೆ ಅರಳುತ್ತದೆ. ಕೈ ಕೈ ಹಿಡಿದು ಸಾಗುವ ಹೆಜ್ಜೆ ನಮ್ಮದು. ಪ್ರೀತಿ, ಧೈರ್ಯ, ಸೇವೆಯೇ ನಮ್ಮ ಶಕ್ತಿ. ಗೋಡೆಗಳನ್ನು ಅಲ್ಲ, ಸೇತುವೆಗಳನ್ನು ಕಟ್ಟೋಣ. ಸಮಾನತೆಯ ಹೊಸ ಲೋಕವನ್ನು ರೂಪಿಸೋಣ. ನಾವು ಜೊತೆಯಾದರೆ ಬೆಳಕು ಹೆಚ್ಚುತ್ತದೆ. ನಾವು ಮಾತನಾಡಿದರೆ ನ್ಯಾಯ ಗೆಲ್ಲುತ್ತದೆ. ಹೆಣ್ಣಿನ ಶಕ್ತಿ, ಹೆಣ್ಣಿನ ಐಕ್ಯತೆ ಹೊಸ ಭವಿಷ್ಯದ ಭರವಸೆಯ ದೀಪವಾಗುತ್ತದೆ. ಒಟ್ಟಾಗಿ ನಾವು ಬದಲಾವಣೆಯ ಶಕ್ತಿ, ಒಗ್ಗಟ್ಟಾಗಿ ನಾವು ಸಮಾಜದ ಹೊಸ ದಿಕ್ಕು. ಎಸ್ ಮ್ಯಾಮ್. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಮ್ಯಾಮ್.
Thank you, Sumita. Thank you, Sumita, for sharing.
Thank you.
And thank you once again, Rati and Mr. Mani and all the other organizers for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Leila. It was very nice. You have really made us go back in history and see the labor that the women's all through from 1900s and all that, how, and in India 1920, whatever you said, no, that from onwards, how the women have struggled to enter the democratic framework collectively. I think that's wonderful. I think now we can take some questions if there are, and people can talk. So I invite all of them to ask any question that people want to ask. ಮಾತಾಡ್ಬೋದು ಎಲ್ರು ಸಹ. ಈಗ ತುಂಬಾ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಮಾತಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅದೇ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಇತ್ತು ಅಂತ. ದಿವಾಕರ್, ಡೂ ಯು ಥಿಂಕ್ ವಿ ರಿಕ್ವೈರ್ ಸಮ್ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಲೇಷನ್? ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ. ಎವ್ರಿಬಡಿ
not required.
ಸಿಂಪಲ್ ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ಇತ್ತು.
Very
ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್
simple English he has explained.
ಯಾರಿಗೂ ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗ್ಬೇಕು.
As she told in the beginning, she has spoken in the language of that women's struggle. So that
Correct.
language is very perfect. It is reachable to all. In
Ha.
Beda answer. Anyway,
Ha.
I don't have any questions, but I thank Leila Passah for the excellent presentation and that enumerating the history of women's movement and also the future needs. What we need is that how to shape the young women who are coming into the picture. If I can mention particularly about the NEET exams struggle which is going on in Delhi, or any new issues which is being taken up by students wing. Even in Bangalore there was a big convention. There we see the women, young girls who are taking up the struggle, mantle of the struggle. That is one positive thing we can observe, and to some extent they are being politicized also. But at the same time, day by day we are seeing the more younger girls being subjected to atrocities.
Right.
Today also I wrote an article on Rajasthan incident. The same kind of incident has happened in Mysore, and the same kind of incident has happened in Kolkata. So the young women or young girls, for example, young girls are being subjected to so much of atrocities. And as per NCRB report, you can see 4.5 lakhs, more than 4.5 lakh atrocities in a year. And most of them are committed by the relatives, husbands, or close family members, family friends. So this is the issue which has to be tackled more by us, and we have to take along the younger generation with us. In that way, the last slide Leila Passah has shared, that opening the doors. That is really an excellent picturization of what lies ahead for us and our responsibility. I congratulate her and I thank her very much for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Leila ma'am, for your insightful and outstanding session. I am so much happy to join today, and I am so much inspired by you since I think 15 years in the history of YWC of India, and truly I could realize that there is a need of women leadership in India, because being in CWC Child Welfare Committee in Odisha, I could see that, as earlier sir has told us, that the increasing crime against young girls are hiking now. And I could see we have so many cases in Odisha, also all over India. You could see the Rajasthan cases, and nowhere children are the girl child, the children, younger girls, and they are not safe at outside and also inside also. So uh, there are so many cases like that, but there is a need of women leadership against all these cases, against all this crime happening with the girls and women today, and also uh, with our community, and what is happening now for the reservation, women reservation, and so many issues in India. As you told about the history and the legacy of women leadership, that is truly inspiring, and we should learn from their lives, from their movements, how they were striking, how they were struggling, and how they have that uh, movement and their courage, and also the mindset towards the society and community, which is reducing now. And all of we are working through different organizations from different fields, from government and non-government organizations. But there is a need of unity is today, it's very necessary, and we should feel that together we can win, and together we can stand against what is happening in the society. So today's lecture, today's session, whatever you said, is very much inspiring and insightful for all of us. And also it energized me personally, because today whatever I am, when I entered into IWCA before 15 years ago, then I could inspired by you only. So seeing you and by your inspiration, by your encouragement, I could stand well in the society, and whatever I am today, I think I am empowered by YWC and other such organizations, women organization, who could be a platform for me to be a voice for the voiceless in Odisha, and especially in Kandhamal and Ganjam district. Thank you so much for your inspiration.
Thank you, Lena. Thank you so much. And thank you to Sir also before that, because he brought out these issues of NEET, as well as, we saw the students actually leading some of these campaigns and protests when it came to CAA also. I think we sometimes assume that young people are very distant and they're not uh, really responding. But I think wherever we are, whichever organization, we have to now start creating platforms where the younger generation feel that they can come and work on a particular justice issue. I often tell people, even students, especially when I interact with them, doesn't matter even if you're a student, just be associated with an issue-based organization. It's very important. And of course, now suddenly, when it comes to the time of employment and CV and all that, they join organization because it looks good on their CV. But what I'm saying is, it's very important to start forming those values of being associated with what is right. And some of these human rights, fundamental rights, are actually they are in our constitution. Not many of us see that, but we have to see that, the linkages. So if we can, even like I think Varsha mentioned earlier, there are lots of women's colleges where they have these desks, or women's desks, or Center for Women's Development Studies. They are they need to be reactivated, because that's our commitment. So wherever you are, I encourage everybody to just create these platforms if there aren't any. Thank you.
Hello.
Matadi? Rekha?
Hello. Yeah, this is
Yeah.
Rekha from Bangalore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Helama.
So, thank you, Leila ma'am. It was very insightful, and you gave us a vision. Now, what all needs to be put in place? Sorry, what all things should be put in place, for us to go ahead being a woman leader or in the leadership journey. So, I have few questions. Actually, I have three. I wanted to know, is there any women empowering leadership programs anywhere? That is one thing. Is there any women group, especially among youngsters, that's already doing good? And then do you see any gaps? Would you like to share any gaps that you see in a new leadership among women?
Rekha, thank you so much for these questions, because each one of them is absolutely crucial and needs to be addressed at different levels. So your first question of are there any empowering women's leadership programs or institutes? Yes, there are. there isn't a very specific leadership institute which offers courses, because these, the whole question of young women's leadership actually doesn't come through a curriculum. But there are organizations which are youth-based organizations or maybe youth-based movements that you should look for that offer these kinds of trainings. Because I have said over and over again, even to my own movement, which I'm very critical of because I grew up in that movement, which is the YW, but it doesn't mean that we have to keep opening. I keep saying, please develop some kind of training programs based on our experiences. Because, even a lot of the training programs that we have developed, it didn't come through textbooks. As women, we have created a lot of creative mechanisms of empowering women, and especially those women in communities. I think we are also talking about make sure that those organizations are going into communities. Like Lena was saying in Orissa, identify those women in communities. It's just that we're not giving access and opportunities. And that comes from a woman who's in a leadership position. We have to have certain values. Like I feel the collective power of decision making, for instance. I think each one of us around here has a leadership quality. Everyone.
Sorry to
Uh,
interrupt.
yes,
I
please go ahead.
didn't get what you just said just few moments before.
Okay. So what I'm saying is, it's very important that
Some more,
also, can you hear me?
some Orissa example you gave. I didn't get what is that example.
Orissa, Lena had just spoken from Orissa. She works with local communities, and even there in the local communities, we need to identify leaders, because some established organizations, youth organizations, from my experience, we think that leaders are only within a certain class, within a certain city, within a certain, but if our organizations open up and have these platforms where, like you are asking, are there leadership courses? There are organizations who do internal leadership building, training, empowering young women on decision making. And I think that any organization can start. It doesn't require a curriculum, and this is a good platform. I think the Friday Forum, all of you have come. You have now, I don't know if there is a method of sharing contacts of people who are not in the forum today. I don't know. But maybe this is one way of beginning to network, because for me, networking is so important today. We cannot work in isolation. There are some organizations who are focused on just leadership training, some organizations who are focused on just violence against women and legal literacy, some organizations. So there are a lot of focused group, autonomous groups today. So you will have to start networking with a few and then build on those contacts. To your second question, did you say any youth group that is around? See, again, there are student organizations, there are also government-led student. I remember the International Youth Association, National Youth Association of India, which has local branches everywhere. Then there are faith-based student movements. There are universities, if they open up groups, because even our own organization, if we have to carry a program, we try to go to the women's colleges to host our program there, so that we can find, what kind of issues we need to work together with the students. So I think there are, some established youth organizations, of course. Some may focus more on recreation than issues. So we need to find those and this is a good platform if we can start networking and looking for those organizations, especially if you're based in Bangalore, Rekha. And to your final question on, do I see gaps? Of course, I see gaps, but I think it's up to every organization and women leaders to first recognize for those gaps. I'll give you a simple example. I think if we recognize that we have not pushed younger women to the forefront and take leadership positions, because we are always there. We are always seen as, oh, she's senior, she's got gray hair, she's, she's been in the movement, she's been the. I told you my own example. I was 22. It was very, very intimidating. I was very scared, So learning from our own experiences of the past, it's really time now to give those kind of leadership positions. And these are also, remember, these are positions of power. We don't often want to let go of. I came into an organization that had a general secretary for over 40 years. But I'm not saying she was a legend in the women's movement. She was the first Padma Shri awardee from the Christian community. But I openly challenged the movement when I had to go around all the local branches, work with young women, because that was my work as a young woman. I said in the open meeting, I said, why? But then by now, why don't we have so many junior Ivy Khans? We don't have, because we are not letting go for some reason. So we need to own up to the fact that it is time, because these organizations are going to collapse if we don't invest in young women leaders today. It'll be too late. It's already too late, I feel. So I have been pushing for this among my networking colleagues also. To tell you honestly, in our recent women's reservation campaign also, we formed a simple example again. We formed a drafting committee to draft the statement, the public position statement, to be handed over at the press conference today, to be distributed all over the country for signatures, to present it to our MPs. And it was, remember, she's not here, I think, Mansi. It was a young woman on that group who drafted the very first base document for us to work on. But we have to keep pushing, Even the press conference today, it was nice to see some younger women leaders and moderating and speaking. But it's up to us who have been there for so long to keep pushing for that, and for us to really step back. It's really well over time, if you ask me, and I think we can do it. We can. We can't say there are no young women around. They're there, very much there. Yeah, sorry, Varsha, I think. Is that okay, Rekha? I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Yeah, I'm happy about it. Actually, my question was, do you do you see gaps, but what are the gaps you see actually? That was.
Yeah, the gap I see is about handing over leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. I think this is something, like, I'm speaking from my own experience, and if we recognize that, it has to be today a partnership, It's not about younger women, older women. It has to be two women who are going to come together and work on that very, very serious issue. Let's say right now is the reservation issue, And so I think we have to bridge those gaps. Yes, and I think that's one of the main gaps of identifying,
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rekha. Was it Varsha? Who had you?
Yes, Leila.
Yeah,
Thank
Varsha,
you
please
so
go.
much. Yeah, it was a very good trip down the memory lane to see how much we have come so far and the kind of privileges that we as younger generation are bestowed upon by our seniors and our sisters who walk this path. Thank you so much for such an insightful presentation, and it's very thought-provoking also. Like, it leaves us with a question that, like, what we can leave for our future generations too. And when Rekha was posing that question, I just wanted to share one example. One of my own personal experience is it happened in 2017 when I was just a young graduate, and I knew that street sexual harassment was a very big issue. But then one of my friend from Bangalore got molested during a New Year's Eve party. I think if everyone remembers, it was 2017, 2016 midnight and December 31st midnight. And then she sent a message to anybody who subscribed to the feminist values, to random strangers who had a post on something of feminist ideology, and she just sent a message and it went so viral, and we all got connected, and none of them were known to me. We got connected from 36 locations across India, and we planned a protest in a matter of 17 days, and 27th of January in 2017 we all came to the streets, and in Hyderabad I led the protest with a few women's colleges. It's called I Will Go Out. There is a page on Facebook even now which is active, which goes under I Will Go Out. You can see all the old photographs and how big the movement was. It was just to call out that the streets are ours, the public spaces, the safety is not our responsibility, but it's a collective responsibility. So I think collectivizing as young women is much more easier in a digital age right now. So one thing is, but then again, taking it to the grassroots level is a bit challenging, but yes, that is a task that is probably that we have to do in terms of collectivizing. So I just wanted to share this experience. And the same thing happened with Bilkis Bano protest also. When uh, I got the numbers from 25 organizations, and Laila, you were sharing some of the numbers, and then we started as a WhatsApp group, and then we took it to the national level. And though I wasn't there in the Delhi protest, but then we had our own regional protests and everything. We formed as a coalition, and questioned the way the justice was delivered. So there are ways to collectivizing, but there is no one formula. I think there are some campaigns which can go entirely online, which will but then now the Cockroach Janata Party, how they are protesting for the educational rights, and demanding the resignation of the education minister. It started online more like a meme, and then now it took shape into a proper protest, an offline protest. So it will grow organically. I think if we initiate it, I'm sure it will. But thank you so much for such an insightful presentation. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Varsha, because this is something that we need to keep reinforcing among all generations, that today we're living in a different time capsule, literally, with the digital media, with social media, with WhatsApps, and the kind of initiative you took as a personal example to say that you immediately, had numbers of friends and started, quickly calling and messaging, and that became a collective movement of its own, which has its own energy, and it had the urgency, and it did have an impact, especially with the Bilkis Bano, I remember. So I think, how do we now take this kind of energy and the access to technology that